so that we can not stare at me the whole time, but look at share screen. Oh, I think I need you to enable me to share the screen. Should be a little, do you know how to do it? The little 3 dots next to my name under participants.
Yeah, I totally meant to do that before we started. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Did that work?
I think so. You'll see. Yeah. All right. Can everybody see my slideshow okay? Everybody see the screen? Okay. So I'll just kind of go through, I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm not going to go into a whole lot, but my name is Jennie Landreth, and I am a TBRI practitioner. TBRI is the program put together by Texas Christian University. Anyone who's really involved in foster care or attachment and trauma usually tend to know Karyn Purvis, who's the one that sort of started all this program, but this was her baby. I went through years of infertility, adopted a baby at birth, thought, well, we won't have any of those problems that other people have because we got our baby when she was 2 hours old. So you can see the picture up here. This is Abby and me when she was a baby. And then the second picture right next to it is Abby and me 10 years later. And we look all cute and sweet and happy, but those 10 years in between those two pictures were kind of a living hell, really. We lived in a lot of chaos, and it was kind of a battle zone. Not kind of, it was a battle zone in our home. So trying to figure out how to help her, we went through doctors and therapists and counselors, and she had 5 different diagnoses. Nobody really could figure out what was going on, why we had this very oppositional child who didn't respond to anything that we did and was miserable. When we figured out what trauma was, what trauma does to a child, and we went to a family camp and learned how to really help her. And within 6 months, she was a different kid. And within 6 months, we were just wanting to shout it from the mountaintops that this is what our kids need, and wanted to be able to help other families. So I began trying to learn as much as I could on my own. I then actually went and trained in Colorado with an attachment worker there who helped teach me a lot. And then I ended up going to Texas Christian University and doing their program there to become TBRI certified. This lower picture is my family. After we adopted her, we had 2 biological children right back to back. And this is our family, and actually that's my parents next to me, but I mean on the other side. But as you can see, this is kind of a major milestone for us to have our daughter stand there in a cap and gown with a smile on her face instead of being in juvenile hall and raising kids while she was still a kid, and a lot of those things that we thought would happen based on the trajectory where she was headed. So, and we really do believe that understanding trauma is what enabled us to help her in the way she needed help. We weren't able to do that. You just love isn't enough. I mean, we think if we take in these kids and we just love them, that that's all they need, but they really do have very specific needs that that any of us can help them with if we just can understand how to see the world through what they see. So she's now, she'll be 20. She is working as a nanny with a family and a contributing member of society, and a lovely person who has compassion and empathy and all those things that we didn't see for a long time. So, and we weren't experts at the time. I'm trying to become an expert as much as I can to be able to help other families. But at the time, I just was at the end of my rope and said, I'm just going to do whatever she tells me because I have no idea. Nothing I have tried has worked. And thankfully, we were pointed in the right direction and were able to help her. So it's been my passion, my love to share this with other families, because what I have just learned is that families who work with kids who have been through trauma, whether they're adoptive parents or foster parents, are the most amazing people on this planet. And so it's been a true honor for me to get to know those kinds of families, because they love when you don't love back. They love without reward. Those are really great people, and they're really great people to be involved in, to work with, and to help empower them any way I can. So that's just a little bit about me. I have my 3 kids now. They're 17, 18, 19, almost 18, 19, 20. My middle son is a freshman at Bryan. My youngest is a senior now, homeschooled, and about to go to Covenant in the fall. So I'm about to be an empty nester in about 9 months. So that's who I am. Okay, so I'm going to start with just a really simple imagery here. One of the things that I think has helped me to be able to communicate these concepts is I want things in lay terms. I want pictures, I want images, I want it described to me in a way that I can understand. So becoming a TBRI practitioner, I had to learn a lot about the brain and the amygdala and the frontal cortex and all these words that didn't really mean anything to me in my everyday life. But I'm a picture person, I'm an image person, a storyteller in a sense, and so a lot of the things that I'll talk about today when it comes to trauma and teaching kids who have experienced trauma, I'm just going to use a lot of illustrations and kind of do some storytelling. So I think a lot of people who have not been involved with kids with trauma tend to see when a child is removed from the traumatic setting, or they're adopted, or they're placed in a home, a foster home, a good foster home, that they've been rescued, that's it, it's over, everything's fixed now. And one of the ways that to help understand the effects of trauma is to think of a hiker hiking who falls off of a cliff. Obviously, you see the EMTs there who have rescued them. That's the point of adoption, right? Or that's the point of foster care, a placement into a home where we've removed them from the place where they were harmed. But they are carrying all these wounds, and just like the illustration where a hiker then may need surgery, a hiker may need medicine, a hiker's going to need physical therapy, a hiker's going to have permanent scars, may have a permanent limp, may have permanent effects from that trauma. Those are the kids that now they're in a safe place, and we know in our minds they're in a safe place, but they are still wounded and suffering from what happened to them before. And with trauma, if you think of a Vietnam vet, these stories that we hear where they came home, some of them just dropped right back into life, got married, had kids, had families, contributing members of society. Some of them turned to alcoholism and drugs. Some of them, you know, through this PTSD ended up committing suicide. So many people who can go through even similar traumas, it affects everyone so differently. So as you're thinking of our kids that we're going to be working with that are in foster care, the fact that they're in foster care, number one, that means they've been through a trauma, a life-altering trauma that has caused massive wounds. And so those wounds are unpredictable. They're different for every person. So anytime you're working with a kid, a student, and you think to yourself, why would you do this? Or I do not understand why they keep doing this over and over. Or why would she say that? It doesn't make any sense. The answer is trauma. It doesn't make any sense. And it affects everyone so differently that our kids will demonstrate all kinds of different wounds from the experiences they've had. So even though they were in a safe place and they're being helped and they're being nurtured now, they're being cared for, they're in a better environment, they're still hurting and they're still suffering from the effects of it. So when you think, why? What were they thinking? Always the answer is trauma. One of the things that actually Dr. Bruce Perry has been really, really great about hammering home and helping us to understand is how experiences change the brain. We think of physical effects being caused, maybe they were hit in the head, or a car accident can cause brain trauma. Those kinds of things are the physical effects, or the physical things that affect the brain. But actual experiences cause physical changes to the brain as well. So a child who is raised and told every day, you're stupid, you can't do anything, you'll never amount to anything, that actually physically changes the makeup of their brain. And I'm not going to get into all the brain stuff. Honestly, the brain is a fascinating thing, and it's not easy to understand even for me. And so, but I have seen and read and had to learn through TBRI of some of the ways that even experiences, even things that we hear over and over and over again, actually physically affect the brain. So on these two sides where these circles are on the brain, that's where our cause and effect comes into play. So we know that if we don't wash the dishes, they'll stink. That's cause and effect. So because of that, we can make a decision, we're going to wash the dishes because we don't want the effect that would come from us not washing the dishes. But as you can see in this picture of the brain, that part of the brain is barely functioning on one side and really not functioning at all on the other. So this means a child who has experienced these changes in the brain here. And that's one of the first ones that trauma affects almost always, is these sides here with the cause and effect. And we think, why would you do this over and over again when you know it's not going to end well? Because this part of the brain is not working. But the great news about this is that positive experiences also affect the brain. So to be in a position with RiseUp where you can be a positive person in these kids' lives, and a consistent experience for them, a dependable person, a calm person, all those things we'll get into in a minute. The great thing is that you are actually helping their brain to heal. The brain can, these things, the brain can fix itself. It's just a fascinating organ. And so it's not a hopeless case. And honestly, one of the things that I remember as a kid, I remember hearing people say, well, they're just a bad seed. Just makes my blood boil, because there is no such thing as a bad seed. Every person is created to be, is a wonderful thing, fearfully, wonderfully made, right? But when they've been wounded, they demonstrate the effects of those wounds. There is no bad seed, and every brain that you come in contact with, because of your positive exchanges with them, you can actually be helping to heal their brain. So it's kind of a sad thing that our kids can come to us so wounded and so hurt, but it's really exciting to know that the brain isn't permanent that way, and that the brain really can begin to self-heal itself based just on experiences. Not talking about knocks in the head or anything, just based on positive experiences. The most positive thing our kids need is the opportunity to succeed. So I used to want to be this domestic goddess. I always just was raised just thinking that being domestic was just the best thing and the ideal thing that we should be focusing on. And I took sewing lessons. I tried to sew. I took lessons from friends. I took a class in it. I took all these things to try to learn to sew. And I mean, every single time I tried to make even just a basic thing, I couldn't put the concept together, and I always came out with something wrong. Well, what I learned from that is I'm setting myself up for failure. And so now you couldn't pay me to try to sew something. I'm not going to set myself up for something that I know I'm going to fail in. Well, if our kids have experienced these failures, the best thing we can do for their healing is to set them up for success. That's one of the things I think is so exciting about RiseUp, is that this isn't about feeling sorry for them, pity, which we'll talk about in a minute, but this is giving them opportunities to succeed, so that then when they have to do it themselves, they're going to succeed. And that is massively healing for the brain. So what you're going to do with them will affect them literally for the rest of their lives. It sounds kind of cheesy, right? But it's actually physically changing their brains. So I think that's exciting, that when we say you can make a difference, it's a difference that a doctor could actually see. Okay, so some of the lasting impacts that trauma has, and when I talk about trauma, just real briefly, I want to just say that could be a one-time trauma. For example, their house burns down, or they lose a parent to a health issue. We could talk about multiple traumas. If even a child is given up for an adoption, like my daughter was, and that was the only trauma she had been through at that point, but then she is separated from her birth mother, and then she had to bond with a complete stranger. That counts as 2 traumas right there. So our kids have been through, so it could be multiple things. It could be abuse and neglect, okay? So multiple traumas, of course, then it becomes much more complex. And then, of course, repetitive or a long-lasting trauma where they're in an abusive situation or a bad situation. And it could be their parents were very poor and couldn't feed them. They were hungry. I mean, it's not always the parents, the biological parents, inflicting pain on our kids. Unfortunately, that is a lot of it. Any kind of trauma or struggle that our kids have gone through. So repetitive, long-lasting trauma, any of these can have those kinds of physical effects on the brain that we saw in the picture beforehand. So as we're talking about a child developing, it affects the brain in a way where our brain develops in phases. So we start with the amygdala and the brain stem and the survival mechanisms that are at the back of our head, the base of our neck, where, you know, a baby knows how to suck, and a baby will can start to learn to move towards warmth and food and comfort and those sorts of things. So this starts with the really basic, and I'm sorry, I feel like I have to sneeze, so if I think it's going away, but and then the brain begins to develop more and more functions. For example, motor skills begin to develop, right? So they can start, you know, they start with their big hands, their little squishy, chubby hands, you know, trying to grab a Cheerio that's very uncoordinated, to where eventually they're able to develop the fine motor skills. So as we think of the brain developing in stages, the last part of the brain to really develop is the prefrontal cortex, where they learn logic, language, reason. That comes last. And that actually doesn't fully develop until the age of 25, which really explains a lot. And so our kids, our teenagers especially, they're still, that prefrontal cortex is just not there yet. And I think car rental companies figured this out before anyone else, because they wouldn't rent cars to anyone until they were 25. So it's important to know that that brain is still developing when we're working with them. But when we talk about someone with trauma, imagine a structure like this, where we're building a house. This is, I guess, a warehouse or something, but imagine one of those beams there is bent, it's damaged, but they continue building. So the next phase might be, you know, if they're putting in the flooring and they've got tile, and they're, you know, someone eventually hangs a sheetrock, the flooring and the tile could be perfectly done. But because there's a damaged beam down in the base of this building, it's going to affect all the other parts of the building. And it's very much the same with our brains. If our kids are experiencing trauma when they're younger, even if things are fine now, and even if things have been fine for years, with a damaged beam at the bottom, it's going to affect and hurt all the other stages in their brain. So that is one of the lasting impacts. One of the things that trauma almost always affects is sensory. We have kids who might, you know, get a tiny little cut and they'll act like it's the end of the world. And then they'll have 103 fever and act like they're fine. You know, things like that, where their senses seem to be skewed. Sounds, you know, we get a lot of kids with sensory disorders now that have been through trauma, where they're just more sensitive to things that taste and textures and sounds and lights. And that's a damaged beam that happened when they were younger somehow. And again, we don't know, you know, specifically which traumas do that and which don't, and everyone's brain is different. But when we're, especially now, us dealing with them mostly as teenagers, you're not going to know what happened to them, but you're going to see things like that where it doesn't make sense. But that the lasting impact of a trauma, even from when they're younger, can show up in all kinds of ways. So again, if you don't know, why in the world would they think that was a good idea? Why in the world would they say something like that? Trauma. It's their trauma. So continuing with this list then, regulation is also one of the lasting impacts that trauma has, where if you come around the corner and somebody's standing there and you didn't know they were there and they startle you, that fear, why does it stop? The fear stops because your prefrontal cortex realizes, they recognize that person. Oh, that's my mom, or that's my brother, or that's my son. And the prefrontal cortex takes over. So that first instinct, that, you know, that's the base, that's the reptilian survival skills that we talk about. But then the prefrontal cortex takes over and says, no, you're safe. This is a person you know. They're not trying to hurt you. And it takes over and controls the back of your brain. Well, our kids were, as their brains are developing, they're in a constant state of, because they don't know when the next thing is coming. And they don't know if they're truly safe because they've been hurt. Well, if a brain continually grows with a, you know, that fear mindset, that becomes the brain's set mode for operation. So when we say calm down to someone, I can't stand it when my husband says calm down to me. If I feel like I legitimately should be upset, don't be telling me to calm down. But to our kids, they can't just make the choice to calm down. Their brains are set to always be on survival mode, high alert mode. So our kids need us to help them regulate. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But just understand that this is something that is a long-term effect too, that they actually kind of need co-regulation. They can't just do it themselves, and they certainly can't do it on command. You can help them do it by doing it with them and demonstrating and teaching them some tools, but you can't just expect them to do it on their own. Trust is a big one. The people in their life that are created to be their person, to be their safety net that they can always count on, somehow it's not there for them. Whether it's the biological parent's own fault or it's not their fault. Either way, our children really have a hard time trusting. So whatever you say is going to be questioned. It's going to be doubted. And there's a natural, in our society, in social interactions, there's a natural sense of trust. We don't go to Walmart and look at everyone like they're going to hurt us. There's kind of this instinctual, implied trust that we have, even with complete strangers, that a lot of our kids are incapable of having, or they've been let down so many times that trust is just not even an option for them. So understanding that their trust is something that not only is difficult for them, it's dangerous for them. If they trust the wrong person, they could get hurt again. So their walls are up, their defenses are up, and trust is really is a struggle. But it's extremely important, isn't it? I mean, isn't that the base of friendships and marriages and healthy relationships, is that sense of trust? So we want them to develop that. We want to be someone that they can trust, but it is a lot of work. When they do, it's a great reward. Another lasting impact is felt safety, which is one of the things that Karyn Purvis was phenomenal to introduce this concept, is the difference between safety and felt safety. We can know a child is safe. We can know the student has everything that they need, but that doesn't mean that they feel like they do. And they're going to act based on those feelings. So you might hear of, you hear stories of kids who have come from orphanages, who hoard food, and the parents, the foster parents or the adoptive parents, just give them more and more food, and they have all the food in the world, and yet they're still hoarding it and hiding it in their room. It's just a great example of how felt safety is a different concept than safety. So as we look at a child, we don't evaluate their behavior or how to help them, gauge how to help them based on their actual circumstances. We actually want to figure out how they feel about themselves and their situation and their circumstances. And I don't know, you know, some foster kids have been in a placement for years and years and years. Some have been in a placement, could be just a few weeks. And either one has the right to feel completely insecure and unsafe, because that bond has been broken. They don't trust, and so they don't feel the safety that we all take for granted, really, in our everyday lives. I talked a little bit about sensory things. This is something that you're going to see kids who may be more sensitive to touch and sound. And we'll touch on that a little bit, but just to be aware that it seems like you might want to, you're exaggerating. It's not that bad. It's not that cold in here. You know, things like that. But their senses, there's a bent beam. There's a damaged beam somewhere in there, and sensory is one of the ones that comes up quite often. And then impulse control is another. The brain, when the brain is in survival mode, it reacts without logic, without reason. It reacts quickly, and it's only later that we can evaluate the things that we've done and said in those moments. And they really struggle with impulse control. So this can mean saying things they shouldn't say. It could be behaviors that are disruptive, or that kind of even seem like they're sabotaging themselves or the situation or the opportunity that they have. But so many times it's an impulse. And if you talk to them afterwards, a lot of our kids will say, I don't want to do that. I didn't mean to do that. I'm trying not to do those things. And so setting them up for success means setting up opportunities where they can practice these opportunities, but it not be a place where they're condemned or they're punished for the impulses that they really can't control. And obviously the objective is for them to become aware of them and for them to learn tools on how to deal with their limitations that they have. So trauma affects our kids for their lifetime. Just like a wound, a broken bone can, you know, even 50 years later, we can get arthritis from it. It's there, and kids have learned how to develop the tools to do it, and people like in TBRI have a great program to teach how to give these kids these tools and to understand. But it really is important to know that just because they're not still in that dangerous situation doesn't mean they're not still dealing with the effects of it. Okay, so I want to just kind of touch a little bit on when I talked about regulating themselves. Again, this is just an image to kind of help understand if we have a child who has broken their leg, we don't expect that child to get up and walk themselves into the doctor's office to get a cast. Regulating themselves, their behaviors, that calm down feeling, I'm okay, I got this, or even I could go to sleep, I'm safe enough to go to sleep, even those kinds of just basic needs, they're not capable of doing those. They are capable of mirroring those. So we have a great opportunity here in just being involved in some things in their lives to demonstrate regulation and to co-regulate with them. So instead of getting mad at a child because they can't take themselves to the doctor to get their leg fixed, instead of getting mad at a student because they won't calm down, we try to help that student. That could be distracting them with something positive. One of the things I used to do with my daughter would be, I could tell she was working up and she would not be able to calm herself down, so I would try to distract her with something positive, and I'd have Skittles in my pocket and I'd throw them in the air and go, Easter egg hunt, you know, and all of a sudden, boom, we go, and she forgot about whatever it was that was starting to dysregulate her, and her brain kind of gave her brain a jolt. But that's where I kind of would help her with her regulation, and not always something that drastic or elevating. It could be something that's more calming. Breathing techniques are really important. Oxygen to the brain really helps kids with regulating. But the primary thing is to remember they can't do it by themselves, and they really do need that support. They need you to help them regulate. So having expectations be more realistic can help us to not get frustrated and overwhelmed with their behaviors, but see that they really do need help, that they're not trying to ruin your day. they need help. Okay, so the pathways in the brain, neurotransmitters are the messages that get sent from your brain. So for example, when I was talking about you turn around the corner, you see someone, startles you, the message from your prefrontal cortex. Well, first the message from your amygdala goes up to your prefrontal cortex. It says, danger, danger, there's somebody there I didn't know about. Then the message goes back. What happens is in our brains, as we get used to those messages and our brain learns how to communicate to the different parts of the brain that do different things, it's basically, it wears a groove into the brain. Just like you walk a path in the woods over and over enough, it actually wears a groove to where you can visibly see it. And we often, like what, 40 years ago, we just called this a bad habit, right? I mean, these are things that, because you've done them so many times, you're used to doing them. And the neat thing is now what we know about the brain is that it actually is a pathway in the brain. Most of our kids' pathways, because of trauma, are zigzags all over the place and completely inefficient ways to communicate with each other. So our kids need help with establishing new pathways. That means repetition. That means setting them up for success over and over, and those experiences are what make these grooves in the brain. So think of those grooves. It's so easy, right, to drop back down into a groove. It's so easy for us, and we have a bad habit to, you know, work really hard. We don't want to be doing it, but then we slip back down into it. And that's the same way with our kids. They've got a lot of grooves that are inefficient, that don't work, but because that's the way their brain was affected with trauma from years and years ago, those are the grooves that they have to this day. Okay, again, I have all these pictures because I try to connect these with scenarios that we can relate to. We all have a person, right? Isn't there somebody, we're supposed to have a person in life, a person. For many years, it's your mom, but it could end up being your spouse or your best friend, or there's always somebody that we have to fall back on. But imagine living without a person like that. So the natural bonds that we were created to have are broken. We don't have that. I absolutely know without a doubt this one person will always be there. To go through life without that is very scary. So think of walking down an alleyway like this at night by yourself. What are you going to be doing? If you're alone, you're going to be looking all around. You might have your key out or your mace. You're ready. You're always vigilant. And you want to get out of there as fast as you can. You're in survival mode. So if you see a piece of trash on the ground, you're not going to care about picking that up. You're just trying to get through this safely. Hypervigilance is something that our kids have, which is they're always aware of their surroundings. They want to know what everybody's doing. They want to know where everybody is. They want to know what's coming up next, because they are responsible for their own safety. So they are always going to be looking and taking in everything around them. So you might find yourself when you're teaching to say, let's just focus on this. But it's not really that easy for them. So understand that their behaviors are fear-based. And fear isn't logical. And their goal in life is to survive. And they think that that's their own responsibility. And as a 2-year-old, they think they need M&Ms or they're going to die, right? I mean, and that means there's no logic here. They just want the M&Ms or they're going to die. So they're going to do whatever they can to get the M&Ms. And that's a little kid illustration, but just understanding that our teens, whatever they're doing, it's just so they can survive. They're good-hearted kids who love just like we love, who want to be loved just like we love, who want relationships, but they can't relax. They can't let their guard down. And learning becomes very difficult when you're being hypervigilant about everything going on around you. Imagination becomes difficult. It's really hard. When you imagine something, you have to let go of reality and kind of let yourself go into another world, right? Well, they can't let go of reality because they might not be safe. So remember that, just that alleyway and how you would just be looking around and checking and making sure you're safe. Who do you want who would you want? If you could pick someone to walk through that alley with you, would you pick, you know, your 90-year-old grandmother, or would you pick The Rock to walk down that alley with you? They need strong, dependable people in their lives to help them feel safe. And if they can control you, you're not a strong, dependable person. You're a weak person. So if you're drowning, you know, they say that someone that tries to rescue a drowning person, the drowning person can pull you down, right? They're not trying to hurt you. They're just desperate to survive. So out of this need for survival, they have tactics that they use to try to maintain control and keep themselves safe. So manipulation is a big, big, big one. They're going to try to use different relationships with people to try to make sure that they're in control. Deception is one where the truth doesn't matter when you're drowning. Morals and ethics and manners, none of that matters when you're drowning. So they're gonna use these approaches, and it's these kinds of behaviors that are based in survival that our society interprets as something else, that they're evil, or they're bad kids, or they're troublemakers, because these are negative behaviors, right? And so we interpret them as being driven by negative motives, but these are survival behaviors. Escalation, I want to talk on a little bit more, because that one is a little bit more prevalent probably in this situation where kids are going to, if they're not getting the control that they want, they're going to ramp it up. So I picked this picture because the bear, this is a charging bear at a guy in a camo here, but it's really fuzzy and blurry. Because this illustration of escalation where so many times our kids just want you to understand where they are. So if like I said before, I don't like it when my husband says, calm down. He doesn't say it anymore after 25 years, he's finally learned. But if I'm truly upset about something and I want you to know how upset I am, if you downplay it or don't validate it, then I have to ramp things up for you to understand how upset I am. So if I'm sitting at a picnic table with a friend and I look behind my friend and I see this fuzzy image, I'm gonna go, a bear, there's a bear, a bear's coming, a bear, look out, there's a bear. Like, help, let's do something, let's protect me, I need help, that's a bear. Now, if the person across the table from me actually knows that that's actually one of those great big chow dogs, the great big furry dogs that look like a bear, like they saw someone walking with the dog 5 minutes ago, and they know that's what I saw. But I don't know that they know that. All I know is I'm saying a bear, and they're saying, no, it's just a dog. They haven't looked, they haven't validated my fear, they haven't understood, they haven't acknowledged that there's danger. So I'm going to raise my voice, I'm going to stand up, I'm going to grab their face and turn it, I'm going to do whatever I can to get them to see that there's a bear, that's my fear. And so a lot of times when you see a student escalating their behavior more and more, it's almost always because they're trying to get someone to listen. Now, the thing that they're escalating about might not be an issue. So if they're making a big deal out of nothing, it's not necessarily that we have to understand what they're specifically saying at the moment. It's more of about understanding where they're coming from and their need for their emotions and their feelings to be validated. So this is the story I use all the time, and now I'll have a lot of friends that kind of tease me about it, going, a bear, a bear, a bear, because it's really just a dog. But I want you to tell me that it's a bear. And then I had this, I used to have these battles with my daughter, and clothes was a big deal for her. And I think she was probably 12, and I was still learning a lot of these techniques. And she came out one morning and just said, well, her whole life had fallen apart because she had this whole outfit planned out. She couldn't find the belt that she needed. So I go into problem solving mode, right? Well, you don't need a belt with that outfit. You look really cute. I did not validate her feelings. Well, why don't you just get another outfit? I've unvalidated her feelings in that situation. I think I'm trying to solve her problem, right? I think I'm trying to help her, but I haven't acknowledged that this was truly upsetting to her. And after going back and forth a few times, and she's just getting more and more upset. The escalation was just rising and rising, and I could see the pot, I could see the lid about to blow. I remembered some of this training that I had gotten, and so I just said, that is so frustrating that you cannot find the belt, and you've planned out this whole outfit. I'm so sorry. And she goes, I know, right? And then she walked off and changed her clothes. I was like, all this time we've been fighting over the belt. And because I wasn't validating that she felt this way. It doesn't mean that you have to tell them they're correct, but it does mean that you understand that they're upset. So the escalation is a big part of them expressing to you their need. It's not a behavior. It's actually a message. I need you to understand. I need you to just tell me that it's okay that I'm feeling upset. Not that it's right or that I need to, but that you're okay with it and you know that I'm upset. That's what a lot of our kids need a lot of the time when you see those kinds of behaviors come up. So this is what's really cool about RiseUp. Looking at I love the logo. I love how the eye is rising. I love that the arrow is pointing up, that we want them to go, we want them to change direction. I just think it's a really powerful logo. And I didn't even have you tell me that, but I can just tell from looking at it, from seeing that arrow, they're changing directions in the way that they're going. And that's really cool. But looking at the components of it, all these things are changing their direction. It's really easy for our kids to get caught in victim mentality. I want you to feel sorry for me. But our role in their lives is to give them tools so that they can succeed. So they can be responsible and independent and strong and empowered. I mean, as a parent, I look at these and think, this is what I want for my kids. These are the things that I want. These are the things that we want for all of our society to have. And these are the things that these kids deserve. They don't deserve to just have someone feel sorry for them their whole lives and do everything for them and then never get the opportunity to succeed themselves and feel empowered. So being able to do that means teaching them and being involved in their lives. You have to take a little bit different role than you would just an average person in society who isn't wounded and walking around with the effects of trauma. So understanding some of their tactics is really crucial to be able to nip them in the bud, to be able to counteract them with a positive response. So I'm first going to just kind of go through some of the things that you might see students communicating to you. How am I doing on time? Okay, 15 minutes. Pity. I want you to feel sorry for me. If I can get you to feel sorry for me, then I can get you to do what I want. Again, if they're in control, they feel safe. But being in control is never over. They can never rest from that. So it's a constant quest for control. But when a child and a student learns to begin to trust, and I think this is one of the neat things about RiseUp, is that they're going to begin to trust the organization, because time after time after time, the people that are interacting with them demonstrate that strength and empower them and give them the tools. So it's actually a really powerful organization, because they're learning that there are whole places that they can trust, which we all need to have in life to be able to function, right? So the need for control, if I can get you to feel sorry for me, then I can get you to do what I want. Oh, poor thing, here's a cookie, here's an extra, whatever. Instead of holding them responsible and empowering them to rise to the occasion, pity actually holds them down. And we'll talk about our responses in just a minute. Entitlement, you can probably see this a lot. Since I've had it so hard, you owe me. Even if you aren't the one that hurt me, you owe me because I've had it so hard. When we talk about pity in a minute with our responses, I'm going to combine pity and entitlement because I think they're very much intertwined. A lot of our kids will seem entitled it's really easy to judge entitlement. It's really easy to judge, who do you think you are that you deserve blah, blah, blah. So it's really important that we understand why they have that behavior, because again, they're trying to get in control so that they can feel safe. The incessant talking is a big one, and I suspect that many of you will deal with this. He who speaks drives the conversation, right? Here, he who speaks holds the power. If I can drive the conversation, if I can manipulate this conversation into what I want it to be or about me or to get my end game, incessant talking is a very powerful tool for them to use. Questioning, do you really know what you're talking about? To try to disarm you. Again, a way for them to feel empowered, a way for them to feel like they're in control is to take away your authority, not just authority as a person in charge of them, but your authority in the subject matter that you're talking about. If I can strip that away from you, then I can take some of the power away from you and have it back in my own hands. Disruption, they're more in control if they can cause a chaotic situation. See, chaos doesn't bother our kids. That's one thing that they've grown up, their brains are adapted to. And in fact, chaos is an opportunity many times for them to be able to get control. So causing chaos can be a way that they can feel some control in the situation. So they're likely to disrupt some. And then anger is the ultimate control here, where in our society still to this day, our instincts are to tiptoe around a person, angry person, to walk on eggshells around an angry person. And what our kids have realized is that people will do a lot just to keep you from getting angry. And that becomes a tool that they can use as well. So these are some of the ways that kids can use to try to get control of a situation. I don't know, I think it's different when it's, there's going to be interesting, it'll be interesting to see how kids respond in Zoom meetings versus how they respond in person. But one of the, well, let's just go on and talk about pity a little bit. Pity, it is so easy to feel sorry for our kids. They have been through awful things. They don't deserve it. They are just children. They should be treasured. I mean, it's heartbreaking when you hear some of the things our kids have been through. It's heartbreaking when you begin to see the turmoil that they carry inside. So it's so easy to feel sorry for them. But if we feel sorry for them, we cripple them. We hold them down. And that's what I love about that's what I love about RiseUp, is that we're not going to do that. That's not why we're here. So if our goal is to empower them, so our approach then needs to be not, oh, you poor thing, but it needs to be, what are you going to do about it? And I'm here to help you with that plan. That became one of the tactics that I learned as a parent to my daughter going through this, was to continually ask that question. I hear that that's really awful. What are you going to do about it? We want to point them to Rise. We want to point them towards change and to point them towards success. So if we have that mindset, then it really helps to not get caught up into the pity of just feeling sorry for them, but to begin to always focus on what's my direction here for helping them get some direction, let's point them, towards a plan. It's really interesting, the story of Helen Keller and Anne Sullivan. I don't know if you all know much about Anne Sullivan, but she was almost blind. She was orphaned. Her mom died when she was young, and then her dad abandoned her and her brother, and then her brother died. I mean, really sad situation. She was in an orphanage that ended up being shut down by the government because of their physical and sexual abuse. I mean, she went through awful things. So when she went to work with Helen Keller, she didn't feel sorry for Helen Keller. She was strict with Helen Keller. She pointed her in a direction. She had a plan, and she empowered Helen Keller, who ended up doing amazing things like this quote, "I cried because I had no shoes. Then I met a man who had no feet." How great would it be for our kids to come out of this program with that mindset? Yes, I've had some hard things. I see that others have it even harder. So I'm not stuck. I'm not stuck crying that I have no shoes. I can move on. Anne Sullivan to me is an amazing story. Everybody usually gives all the attention to Helen Keller and what she accomplished, which were amazing things. But I believe that Anne Sullivan was her teacher, and that's the kind of teachers that RiseUp can have to really be people in these kids' lives that can point them in a completely different direction. So don't get caught in that trap of pity. The incessant talking is a really, really difficult one to deal with, but it usually kids learn fairly quickly what tactics will work and what won't. So don't be discouraged by this, but he who speaks controls. So this also includes repetitive and obvious questions. Why is the sky blue? You know, do I need to put the straw in the hole? You know, like really obvious things that you know that they know, but really this is just their way of trying to control the conversation. Try not to repeat yourself with them. You know, if you've said it once, you can remind them. We've already talked about that. I think you know. See if they know. You can ask them, turn it around and ask them back. But with your time with the students, have very designated time. So have a designated time for chit chat or for hangout time if they want to tell a story or something. But really stick to whatever guidelines you set. Remember, it's really important that you be dependable, consistent, so that they can learn to trust you. So stick to whatever time commitments that you set. So if you have a student that is speaking about something in an inappropriate time, something like currently we're talking about sorting laundry, so I want you to save that story for our next free time. So you're acknowledging they want to talk, but you are sticking to the boundaries that you've set. And it may take a little while, but kids really do tend to figure out that I can't keep talking in this class. It doesn't happen. And I know that RiseUp will have guidelines for when do you reach out and get help when a student isn't responding to your prompts. But it's really important that you follow through with those. So whatever tools that they give you for doing that, be consistent to follow those. Reach out and get help. Get someone to come in and either take that student, they'll take that student for a few minutes and talk to them, or they'll sit with that student to encourage, whatever it is that how they handle it. But maintaining control of the classroom is important. Classroom, class setting, the environment, whatever the setting is for that time. Okay, so questioning, really, there's two kinds of questioning. Inquisitive questioning, man, that's the best. When you're a teacher and you've got a student who's asking questions because they want to learn something, that's fabulous. You don't want to mess with that at all. But the questioning authority is a whole different ballgame. And again, that's a control tactic to try to disarm you, to put you on the defensive, to knock you off your game so that they can feel in control. So just, if you know that's what they're doing, the most important thing is our instinct. We want to be respected. We want to be treated like people, especially if we kind of know what we're talking about. And it feels personal. So it's not personal, and neither is it personal. And lastly, it's not personal. It feels personal. And when we take it personal, then we kind of attack back or we push back instead of what we need to do, which is that calm, consistent response to them. It's positive, but it's firm. And their questioning of you doesn't mean you have to question you. So having that confidence as you walk into those situations and being aware that they might try to disarm you that way, again, not because they're bad kids, but because they feel insecure or they don't feel safe. They're testing you, right? Disruption is another one. Does anybody ever feel like, I don't know if you're, if you like your environment, some people are really, I can't stand to walk into a place that's full of clutter, or I just want to paint my room because I just need it to kind of match my inner, we tend to want our environment to match what's going on in our brain, to match our personality. And their brains developed in a state of chaos. So they are often more comfortable in a chaotic situation than they are in a calm, structured situation. They're going to test your ability to see if you can stay in control. And you know what? That's a compliment, because it means that you're being interviewed for the job of being somebody in their life. So embrace that. When they test you, it's okay. You can maintain control, again, without feeling any pity for them. That's where you'll break down, is if you start feeling sorry for them, but maintaining consistent and calm control. And if you draw a line in the sand, don't ever, ever, ever let that line go. So it'd be very intentional when you're in a situation that if you draw some sort of line, if you do that again, you're out, or which is generally wouldn't want to try to avoid that. It was just the first example that popped in my head, but any kind of consequence, or we're going to stop, I'm not going to let you participate if you continue, any kind of line you draw like that, be absolutely sure before you draw the line that it's one that is consistent with the RiseUp priorities, that it is life affirming to them, that it's not shaming them. Make sure that you can follow through on it, that it's something that you can do and that you should do if you draw a line. So you don't want to ever let yourself get backed into a corner. You want to be consistent and trustworthy. Now, we all have buttons, right? Okay. My button when my daughter was younger was hurting the animals. If it looked like she was hurting my dog, I would just go ballistic and just lose it. So then she learned that was my button, and that if she could knock me off my game, then she could gain control. So you need to hide your buttons. One button that's really common for all of us is to be treated with respect. And if we feel like someone's disrespecting us, we're like, oh no, you cannot talk to me that way. Well, they can't talk to you that way, but it can't be because it's your button. It has to be because we want to encourage and help them to be their best selves, not because you deserve respect. It's because they're healthy if they treat people with respect. So hide your buttons. You can't make it personal. But do remember that when they're testing you like this, it really is a compliment, and it's a privilege and an honor to be interviewed by them as a trustworthy person in their life. Okay, anger is the big one. This one often could be their last resort, where they've tried lots of other things. They've tried manipulating the situation. They've tried some other tactics. Anger tends to get people to pay attention. People wake up. People will give you what you want to calm you down. So anger, there's no room for anger. So there's no tolerance for anger. We can be tolerant of a lot of behaviors, but when it comes to anger, disrespect, and threats, it's really important that a line is drawn, that this isn't okay to happen, and that steps need to be taken. And at this point, I think RiseUp, they're going to give you tools. They're going to be there to support you if these things are happening, so you're not alone. You don't have to deal with this stuff alone. But make sure that absolutely, if you feel like they're being threatening, either physically or shaming another student, anything in those lines, that can't be tolerated. So whatever steps, each situation is a little bit different. So just as you get into those situations, just be aware that that's where it's probably good to have someone else step in or be able to talk to Sandy and Joe or some of the other staff who can give you some tools to deal with that student or come alongside that student in that situation. Is that, Sandy, is that okay and good for, yeah, that's the one where we're tolerant in a lot of things, the incessant talking, we're tolerant in that. We can deal with that and we can absorb that and work with that. But once you get to this point where there's any kind of physical threat or anger or outbursts like that, then really do. It's important for them. And again, if we intervene on these things, we are actually helping them to be healthier people. And that's what we want. We want them to rise up. We want them to be healthy. Okay, so just a few thoughts just to wrap things up in handling these kinds of controlling behaviors. And I'm thinking now, are there 2 L's in controlling? I think maybe that's a typo. Sorry about that. Hide your buttons. None of this is personal and none of this is about you. So if they do things that really drive you nuts, that is between you and your own family, your own therapist, whatever. That has nothing to do with them. They should have no responsibility for your behavior for your emotions and for your composure. Okay, so their behaviors should not affect you at all. So hide your buttons. Always remain calm. Even when you feel like on the inside you're just about to explode, right? On the outside, we remain calm and consistent. And then our interactions with them should always be based on compassion, never conditional, very consistently compassionate. No matter what they do, we're approaching it with compassion, and we don't base our relationship on, I'm going to be closer and have a better relationship with the good kids, and the ones that are causing trouble, I just need them to go. That's what they're used to. A lot of them have figured out that they're safer if they can get you to push them away, because anyone that cares about them is a dangerous person. The more you care about them, the more you can hurt them. So they're going to be pushing you away like that. So very consistent compassion with them, and don't ever make it conditional on their behavior. Behavior, obviously, it doesn't determine a person's value. So the kid that's causing the disruptions week after week after week and is wearing you down and driving you crazy is precious in God's sight, and just as valuable and just as worthy to be there to get help as the kids that seem a little bit easier or more enjoyable. It's hard to remember day to day. The ones that are always causing trouble are the ones you just want to not hear from them. But they need that inviting, no matter what your behavior is, that you matter. That's what they need from us. Real quick, as far as TBI, this is one of the TBR slides where some of the things that we can do physically with our bodies and our eyes. If we're going like this, yes, let's try that again. So much you can see in our expressions. Warm eyes, we call them soft eyes when we were working with Abby. And one time Abby actually said to me, because she had heard all this stuff too, because we had been working through the family camp, and she said, "Mom, you're using your soft eyes, but you're clenching your teeth." So being really conscious of our physical, presentation to them, being open to them, matching them. Behavioral matching is really kind of exposure. Nurturing touch, you're gonna knock that one out these days with COVID and so much else. I'm gonna not go there. I'm sure Rise is gonna have more specifics, but at this point, that's kind of old school Karyn Purvis. But the behavior matching could be if you're holding a baby and the baby starts going and pouting, what do? We do it too. We go, "Oh, what's the matter?" We match them. So match our students. It communicates that I'm wherever you are. So if they come in and they're all excited, then that's what we want to match. If they're, down and, don't be like, "Hey," we want to match what they're doing. So I can see you seem to not be very happy, or are you having a bad day? Or so that's what that means. That warm eyes obviously is the facial expressions. Our voice quality, of course, we want to be engaging with them. And playful engagement is really helpful to disarm anger or the word just slipped out of my head. Kind of that grouchy, I don't want to be here, I'm being made to come. If you can engage with them in a playful way and get them to respond to that, then it can really is a very powerful tool. And also, if we become playful, we've let our guard down a little bit. So it's a great goal to have with our kids, is to be able to joke around a little bit, and for them to see that you're not that intense, that you're a safe person. And for you to show that you're a safe person, you have to let your guard down a little bit. So be willing to joke around with them and be playful, and however is your personality. Okay, so here's a few phrases that hopefully will help as you are in those situations, because I always think, well, what do I say when a kid says this? I can't show them the slide from Karyn Purvis where, so a lot of some of the responses can be, "Thank you for letting me know." You're not taking on their problems, but you are acknowledging that they've shared them with you. What do you think is the one with, are we supposed to be on page 4? After you've just said 3 times, everybody on page 4, Are we supposed to be on page 4? What do you think? I think I've answered that. I think you tell me. So that's a good one, is to kind of put it back on them. I see you're having a hard time. Miss Sandy wants to check in with you and make sure you're okay. Now, what is this really saying? You're not able to behave the way that's appropriate in class. It's not saying shame on you, you're out, you failed. It's saying we want to check in and make sure there's something else going on. So if you're running a class, you can't just stop the class to check in with a kid, and being with an organization like RiseUp is a great opportunity because you have a team. You're not doing any of this by yourself. Talking to students about a situation, something that went wrong. It could be an interaction with another student, to get them to talk it through without the shame or even the threat of punishment, but just what could you change about the situation if you could? Again, that's that thinking of what are you going to do about it? What's your plan going to be? How can you fix this? There are things that we can't change, and it's healthy for them to talk about that too. If we get a disrespectful response, I'm going to give you a redo on that. I need a lot of stuff that comes out of my mouth. I need a redo personally. It's a gift to give someone a redo, right? To not hold them accountable to absolutely every first thing that comes out of their mouth, but to allow them to think for a sec. Okay, I need to say something different. Let me get a second chance to try again. Try again with respect. If they're saying something that's not respectful, to remind them that it needs to be respectful, and then let them have a second chance. What happened? What could you have done differently? So if you have a situation where there may be a conflict or something, or they're sharing an experience that happened to them, to get them to just discuss what they did or what they didn't do and what they could have done differently. That's how we process through mistakes that we make to be able to correct them in the future. And I'm sorry you feel this way is really, it's kind of a cheesy expression. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you say it that way, but that you're expressing, you're validating. And that really is a powerful thing. If they're saying a bear, a bear, a bear, then we validate and say, that's really scary when you think you've seen a bear. Or that really stinks when you've planned out this whole outfit and then you don't have the belt to go with it. So that's what that one is. So those are just a few phrases of things to kind of help you with in those situations to have that mindset. If they can get you to repeat yourself, then you're not strong enough for them. Okay, so try to say it once or twice, and then if they keep continuing to ask you and you feel like you're repeating yourself over and over, turn it back around to them. You tell me, what did I just say? And I don't know. Well, that's okay. You can take a few minutes and think about it and see if you can remember. I'm pretty sure you can. You're a super smart kid. I know that you've done this before. I think you heard me. I know you speak English, things like that, where we're going to maintain control and not keep saying things over and over again. If they can catch you in a lie, then you become a perpetrator to them. So it's really important that you're always honest and trustworthy for them. They will try to trap you at times. So this last one, outgum them, is I had one of the moms that came to our camp had this little girl who constantly wanted the mom's gum, and it was like spearmint. It was for her breath. She didn't chew it for fun. She's kept it in the car for when the coffee aftertaste was too strong, and her daughter just constant, can I have your gum? I want a piece of gum. I want some gum. I want some gum. I want some gum. And she was like, I don't know how to help her. So we took the approach of, let's outgum her. Go buy a ton of that gum and give it to her before she asks. Offer it over and over and outgum her. You give it to her before she asks for it. So that has kind of become an expression, this outgum, is that we want to meet their needs before they need to even ask for them. So as you get to know the students, or as you get to know the situation, that if there's any way that you can anticipate what these kids need or what they might want, and that you get to give it to them. We want all good things. We want RiseUp to give them all good things, so that it is a completely positive experience for them and a place where they can succeed, So we want to outgum them in any way that we can. So just be thinking about that as far as, anticipating if you know that they're going to ask for water every class. In the middle of class, give them a bottle of water before class starts, that kind of thing. Just getting to know them personally. They are actually the most rewarding audience of all. Trauma twists relationships, and you have this incredible opportunity to model a healthy relationship with them. They're so worth it. And the impact on them, it really does last for a lifetime. It changes their brain. It affects their relationships in the future. And really it affects the people in their lives. So the impact reaches far greater than that one person. It could be their spouse, their children, their coworkers, and on and on and on from having healthy relationships. Being on the team with Rise, always remain calm. That's really important with our kids, to be predictable. Expect disrespect. It's a tool for them. They don't mean it, and it's not personal. And they want nothing more in life than to respect you. That's what they want. But they're going to try to not respect you because that's what feels safe. And then the last thing I want to touch on with this is just don't believe everything a foster child tells you. Sometimes false allegations are made because that's a way for them to control the situation. So, we had a family that the mom was making her daughter this lovely, healthy, wonderful lunch with little notes in it for how much she loved her and little treats in it. And every day that little girl would throw it away on her way to school and then tell her teacher that her mom never fed her. So then the teacher ends up calling CPS and, saying this poor child is never getting fed. And the mom's like, I've been making these amazing lunches every day. So it's a control thing. So just remember that truth doesn't matter when you're in survival mode. These kids aren't bad kids. They're not liars, right? But they may not tell the truth because there's a way for them that they might feel safe if they don't. So exaggerations, I like to say, I like to exaggerate. It's my literary style, helps get the point across. So you're going to hear some of those. And also, so many of our foster kids are shopping for their next family because they don't have a sense of permanency. So they may be testing. They're always looking, who's going to be my next family? Who's going to be the next place that I go? And what can I get from them? So just be aware of what they're telling you, that it's not necessarily true. And obviously, any allegation that you do hear, you need to tell the appropriate people at RiseUp, because there are times where these are true. And we obviously do need to be a person in their life that listens and gets them help. But it's something that has to be weighed. So don't ever carry that alone. Always share that, what you hear, especially if there's an alarm going off in your head that doesn't sound right, then let them know. And that's all I've got for that. I would, did I make it on time? Whoa, I'm way over, sorry. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to chat about any specifics. I'm sorry, I went over. It's so much to talk about. It's hard to not talk about it.
It seemed like it went fast. I didn't know it went that far over either.
Well, that's a good sign.
You were very thorough. I took pages of notes, and I greatly appreciate all that you shared. I personally don't have any questions off the top of my head. Maybe some of the other ladies that are on, or Joe, might have them.
Well, I don't have any questions. I really enjoyed it, though. It was very good. Some of it I'd heard before in other training classes, but it was really good, though. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
I do have a question about your slideshow. Would it be possible for you to share with me so that I can have people look at it while they listen to this audio?
Sure. If you recorded, did you just record the audio or the whole Zoom session?
That's a really good point. I recorded the whole thing.
Okay, so it's probably on there.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to send it to you too.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I really, I do. I love to talk about this stuff, and my daughter is my inspiration for how we really can have an impact on these kids who are headed in a different direction. And I think it's really cool that RiseUp has got, you know, the objective here to point them in a different direction where they can succeed. That's pretty exciting. So
Thank you.
Thank you. We are excited
Thanks.
about it. And if you would like to do in the near future or in the distant future another training, like maybe a follow-up, kind of a spin-off of this, like a part 2 or whatever, we would love to have you back anytime.
sure. All right. I'd be happy to. Yeah. Just holler at me.
Sure. Thank you
All
so
right.
much. And thank you all for joining.
Great.
Nice to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Bye.
Thank you.